The torrential rains that hit eastern and southern China in June 2025 triggered one of the worst natural disasters in decades. What started as a series of isolated showers quickly escalated into a national emergency as cities like Hangzhou, Ningbo, Huiji, and areas across Guangdong were completely overwhelmed by the magnitude of the catastrophe. Streets turned into rivers, drainage systems collapsed, and entire communities vanished underwater within hours. Coastal cities in Guangdong, including densely populated areas like Zhaoqing, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, and Huiji, were struck especially hard. Within just 24 hours, all historical rainfall records were shattered. Water levels rose to unprecedented heights, submerging car rooftops, flooding multi-story buildings, and forcing thousands to seek refuge on the upper floors of their homes or even on rooftops. Chinese authorities declared the highest possible flood emergency level. One of the most critical points was Huiji County in Zhaoqing City. On June 17th, the Sujiang River and its tributaries burst their banks with extreme force. At Huichin Road Hydrological Station, water levels reached 55.22 meters, more than 5 meters above the warning threshold, breaking a record that had stood since 1955. Experts described the event as a once-in-a-century flood. The severity of the situation forced the government to launch an unprecedented emergency response. Widespread shutdowns were ordered, schools were closed, workplaces suspended operations, public transport halted, and commercial activity was stopped. The entire population was mobilized to support rescue operations and defend critical infrastructure. More than 68,000 people were evacuated in Huiji alone, with nationwide displacement estimated at over 200,000. Satellite images and ground footage revealed scenes of utter devastation. Floating buses, cars piled like rubble, homes swallowed by water, and helicopters conducting rooftop rescues. In rural areas, farms were completely wiped out, rice paddies and vegetable fields submerged, and livestock shelters abandoned. Fishermen also reported massive losses as fish ponds burst and nets were torn apart. In several mountainous regions near Guangzhou and Zhaozhou, the disaster took another form. Landslides caused by oversaturated soil buried roads, uprooted trees, destroyed buildings, and blocked access to entire villages. High-speed rail lines were suspended due to the risk of track collapse, leaving hundreds of passengers stranded. Near a hillside school, several buildings were destroyed by a collapse, although early evacuations prevented fatalities. In Huiji, on June 18th, it was confirmed that over 60% of the city was underwater. Hydrological monitoring stations warned that the Sujiang River could reach levels of 55 meters, sparking widespread alarm. In just 3 days, that same river section experienced 4 extreme floods. The water rose so rapidly that there was barely time to react. Meanwhile, the rain continued relentlessly. From June 14th to 15th, nearly the entire Guangdong province experienced intense downpours. At some meteorological stations in Huiji, up to 302.5 millimeters of rain was recorded in just 12 hours. Torrential storms returned again on June 17th, worsening the already critical situation. The regional average rainfall was 79.3 millimeters, but several stations recorded totals exceeding 250 millimeters. The government responded swiftly and on a massive scale. Over 10,000 rescuers from provincial, municipal, local, and community levels were deployed to the affected zones. Specialized equipment like backhoes, rubber boats, mobile lighting systems, drones, and helicopters were used. Temporary levees were built to redirect the water, and flood defenses along the Sujiang, Jianghe, and Fang rivers were reinforced. The entire emergency apparatus was mobilized at record speed, but the response wasn't limited to official channels. Volunteers formed human chains to deliver food and water to stranded families. Emergency shelters were set up in schools, stadiums, and government buildings, where displaced families spent the night with blankets, umbrellas, and plastic tarps. Special attention was given to the elderly and children, many of whom were carried through windows and transported in rescue boats. Critical infrastructure suffered heavily. Numerous power stations failed, leading to widespread blackouts. Floodwaters mixed with sewage and waste, creating serious public health hazards, especially in urban areas where overwhelmed sewage systems could no longer cope. In places like Zhaoqing, water surged out of storm drains and flooded street-level shops. The preliminary economic impact in Guangdong province was estimated at over 41 million yuan. More than 898 hectares of farmland were damaged, along with 13 schools and at least 3 hospitals. Some areas, like Zhonghao, were completely cut off from the rest of the country due to the destruction of major roads. State and local media reinforced warnings about the ongoing rainfall. Meteorological stations issued red alerts, warning that the emergency conditions could persist or even worsen in the coming days. Residents were urged to stay indoors unless absolutely necessary, especially in cities like Guangzhou, Shenzhen, and Dongguan. At the same time, residents shared harrowing images on social media that looked straight out of a disaster movie. Entire families perched on rooftops, motorcyclists using makeshift megaphones to broadcast warnings, and entire neighborhoods turned into rivers of muddy water. Fear mingled with solidarity as blue sky rescue teams, the Red Cross, and firefighting units from various cities worked shoulder to shoulder to reach every corner in need. At some riverside clinics, medical staff stayed through the night moving equipment and medications to higher ground. Elsewhere, authorities were still struggling to locate people reported missing amid landslides. In just one day, rescue teams completed 17 aerial evacuation missions and saved over 80 individuals in extreme danger. As the events unfolded, international aid offers began pouring in. Several countries offered technical assistance, medical resources, and rescue personnel. The United Nations activated its disaster response monitoring systems, while humanitarian agencies rushed emergency supplies to the hardest-hit areas. Simultaneously, the Chinese government began laying the groundwork for reconstruction. Engineers and planners are now assessing how to strengthen buildings in vulnerable zones, improve drainage infrastructure, and develop more effective early warning systems. Although the scars of this disaster remain fresh, officials say decisive action is being taken to prevent such a catastrophe from ever happening again. The worst flooding in China in many years has left behind not only devastation, but also countless stories of courage, sacrifice, and survival. In the midst of mud, darkness, and despair, thousands came together to confront the impossible. And though the waters have yet to fully recede, the spirit of recovery and hope is already beginning to rise.